The Amethyst Ghost, the survival of Mace Windu. To bring this massive project to life on my Chromebook, I am using AI tools to help with the writing and narration, but make no mistake, every single lore drop, every timeline correction, and the entire direction of this story comes straight from my own Star Wars knowledge. I've personally proofread, edited, and refined every single line to ensure it fits perfectly into the galaxy we love. Today, we answer a question that has haunted the fandom for years. What if Grandmaster Mace Windu survived his fall into the Coruscant underworld, stranded on the Outer Rim, broken, and forced into hiding? This is Chapter 1 of The Amethyst Ghost, Part 1. The Fall and the Fleshing Ozone. The air in the Chancellor's office didn't just smell like ozone. It smelled like boiling flesh. When the white-hot torrent of Palpatine's Sith lightning finally ceased, Mace Windu wasn't just defeated. He was broken, betrayed, and helpless. The raw, malicious energy had boiled the fluid in his joints, melted the top layers of his skin, and left his nervous system misfiring in violent, agonizing spasms. His right arm ended in a charred, smoking raggedness where his hand had just been severed. Then came the push. The kinetic blast threw him backward, shattering the reinforced transparasteel window, and hurled him out into the Coruscant sky. The descent was an exercise in pure survival. Any lesser Jedi would have blacked out from the sheer trauma of the lightning, but Mace's mind was an unyielding fortress. As the freezing upper atmosphere winds whipped past his face, he forced his trembling left hand forward, drawing upon every remaining ounce of his connection to the living force. Surviving a fall from the Senate district required an immense, almost fatal expenditure of energy. Mace couldn't fly. He had to manipulate the air friction around his flowing robes, creating a localized kinetic cushion, while simultaneously using tiny bursts of telekinesis against the passing traffic grates and building ledges to bleed off his terminal velocity. Every microburst felt like an iron spike driving into his swollen, lightning-scarred brain. He fell past the gleaming spires of the upper class, down through the industrial exhaust sectors, and finally plummeted into the dark, smog-choked canyons of the lower world. With a sickening crunch that broke 3 of his ribs and fractured his left clavicle, Mace crashed through the rusted canopy of an automated garbage collection barge, navigating level 5127, the deep, toxic underbelly of the Uskru district. When he rolled off the barge into a pile of industrial scrap, hours later, the universe was screaming. Through the cosmic force, the sudden, simultaneous deaths of thousands of Jedi hit his mind like a physical blow. Order 66 had begun. Yoda felt it as a tremor. Mace, already hovering on the edge of death, felt it as a psychic execution. Part 2. The Anvil and the Chits. He couldn't pass out. If he slept now, he would never wake up. Dragging his broken body through the toxic neon slush of level 5127, Mace quickly realized the galaxy had inverted. The streets above were already swarming with Coruscant Guard shock troopers, the specialized clone unit in crimson-striped Phase 2 armor. Every public terminal and comm channel was blasting an automated, high-priority emergency directive. All Jedi are enemies of the Republic. Lethal force authorized. Any citizen harboring a Jedi will be executed for treason. They didn't know Mace was alive, but they were sweeping the lower levels with brutal efficiency, looking for any signs of the now branded traitors. Huddled in the shadow of a moisture vapor vent, Mace heard the rhythmic crunch of plastoid boots. A lone Coruscant Guard shock trooper had split from his patrol to check a dark maintenance alcove. Mace, knowing use of the Force could be dangerous, he had to rely on raw, desperate strength. As the clone stepped past the vent, Mace lunged from the shadows. He didn't use a flashy strike. He used his body weight. He slammed his left elbow into the clone's helmet seam, disorienting him, and wrapped his left arm around the trooper's neck in a brutal sleeper hold. The clone thrashed, his blaster carbine clattering to the floor. Mace, gasping for air as his broken ribs screamed in agony, locked the choke, using his leg for leverage until the trooper went completely limp. Mace didn't strip the armor. He knew attempting to sell serialized Republic military gear would flag any black market dealer instantly. Instead, he systematically rifled through the trooper's utility belt. He took the clone's standard-issue Imperial credit chits, a high-grade military comlink, and a field medic pack containing emergency coagulant needles. Before leaving the alcove, Mace stripped away his own scorched, recognizable Jedi robes, tossing them deep into a waste incinerator chute. He stole a heavy, grease-stained mechanic's jumpsuit and an oversized canvas poncho from a laundry line outside a nearby lower-level freighter depot. It was filthy, but it covered his lightning-scarred flesh and hid his missing hand. He used the clone's credit chits to pay for an emergency operation in the back alley den of a subterranean cyber dock. A shady, uncredited, alien surgeon operating out of a disassembled droid workshop who didn't ask questions as long as the currency was untraceable. The surgery was an agonizing nightmare. There was no back-to-tank, no high-grade anesthetics. The doctor bolted a heavy, industrial-grade cybernetic arm directly into Mace's raw nerve endings. It was a blocky, unpainted piece of metallic scrap, meant for a heavy-labor freighter captain, loud, mechanical, and entirely lacking synth flesh. When Mace finally looked at his new metal fist through swollen, bloodshot eyes, he didn't see a limitation. He saw an anvil. Part 3. Escaping to the Grasslands. Getting off Coruscant was an impossible puzzle. The planetary airspace was completely locked down by Republic Venator-class star destroyers, and every public spaceport required biometric clearance. Mace, wrapped in his stolen mechanic's poncho, to hide his face and his loud mechanical arm, tracked the movement of cargo freighters. He slipped into the industrial loading docks of level 2400, where automated bulk freighters packed with raw coaxium and scrap metal were being prepared for shipping to the Outer Rim. Using the stolen clone comlink, Mace listened to the Imperial chatter, mapping out the blind spots in the security perimeter. When a massive, independent Corellian cargo hauler cleared its automated pre-flight checks, Mace used a tiny, agonizingly painful burst of the Force to cloud the mind of a weary hangar supervisor, slipping into an unpressurized maintenance crawl space near the ship's hyperdrive core. For 3 days, as the ship jumped through hyperspace, Mace endured sub-zero temperatures and the deafening thrum of the engines, relying entirely on the stolen clone rations and sheer, stubborn willpower to stay alive. When the freighter finally dropped out of hyperspace to unload its cargo, Mace slipped out into the vast, wind-swept agricultural plains of Lothal, a rural world on the Outer Rim, completely disconnected from the desert wastes where Obi-Wan hid. Part 4. The Silent Spire and the Living Shroud. Mace did not immediately seek out a life of manual labor. He needed a plan, he needed guidance. While he wasn't strong enough yet, he needed rest and time to think, and so he made a plan. As a Grand Master of the Order, Mace's mind held a mental cartography of every hidden sanctuary across the galaxy. He knew that deep within the northern hemisphere of Lothal lay an ancient subterranean Jedi temple, a powerful vergence in the Force, built over a natural wellspring of energy. It was a place designed for deep meditation, communion, and the sacred trials of the gathering. Covered in freezing frost from the unpressurized flight, his broken ribs screaming, Mace walked for miles across the jagged, stone-dotted plains until he reached the coordinates. Before him stood a massive, circular configuration of ancient stone markers cut into the ground. In the center sat a towering, natural rock spire. Under normal circumstances, A Jedi Master and Padawan would stand upon the emblem and use a synchronized harmonic focus of the Force to physically raise the monolithic spire out of the earth, revealing the hidden door to the lower caverns. Mace was alone. He had no apprentice, a broken body, and a severely fractured connection to the light. Kneeling in the center of the concentric stone circles, Mace closed his eye. He gathered every ounce of his remaining strength and thrust his mind into the stone spire, attempting to command the mountain to move. But the moment his consciousness touched the deeper currents of the Force, he was struck by a wall of absolute, suffocating darkness. The Sith victory on Coruscant had generated a psychic shroud that covered the entire galaxy. The cosmic force wasn't just quiet. It was violently obscured by the triumphant malice of the dark side. Mace tried to push past the shroud. He cast his mind outward into the vacuum of space, desperately searching for the unique, familiar light signatures of his peers. He reached for Yoda's ancient, deep presence. He reached for Obi-Wan's bright, steadfast resolve. He searched for Plo Koon, for Shakti, for anyone. Nothing returned. The silence was absolute. In his heart, the terrifying reality solidified. I am entirely alone. The Council is dead. The Order is gone. The strain of the attempt broke his focus. Mace collapsed onto the cold dirt, coughing up blood, unable to summon even the minor telekinetic weight required to budge the temple's stone entrance. The ancient sanctuary remained locked to him, buried in the earth, refusing to answer a broken master. The strain of the attempt broke his focus. Mace collapsed onto the cold dirt, coughing up blood, unable to summon even the minor telekinetic weight required to budge the temple's stone entrance. The ancient sanctuary remained locked to him, buried in the earth, refusing to answer a broken master. Exile in the high grass. Realizing he had no sanctuary and no instructions from the Force, Mace retreated into the wilderness. For weeks he lived like an animal in the craggy limestone ridges that broke up Lothal's endless wind-swept grasslands. His survival was a grueling test of endurance. His supplies were pitifully limited. A single, half-empty standard-issue field medic pack from the clone trooper, a handful of stale military ration wafers, and the heavy canvas poncho on his back. He learned the harsh reality of the Outer Rim the hard way. He used the clone pack's coagulant needles to hold his torn flesh together, but there was no Bacta to soothe the deep internal burns from Palpatine's lightning. When his rations ran out, he had to forage. He tracked the movements of local lothcats, watching what wild tubers and scrub roots they dug up, learning which native flora was safe to consume and which was toxic. He used his blocky, industrial cybernetic arm not as a tool of combat, but as a crude hammer to crack open hard-shelled river nuts and chip away flint to spark small, smokeless fires in the hollows of the rocks. But the isolation was dangerous. With nothing but the wind and his own thoughts, the silence of the Force became a deafening roar. In the quiet of the plains, he could still hear the echoes of the younglings crying out in the temple. He could see Anakin's blade severing his wrist. He realized that sitting alone in the wild, nursing his trauma, was turning him into a ghost. Worse, a lone, scarred man wandering the empty wilderness with a mechanical arm would eventually draw the curiosity of local planetary scouts. To disappear completely, he needed to blend into the background of society, hiding in plain sight. The opportunity came when he slipped into a dusty, remote agricultural outpost to trade a handful of scavenged river stones for clean water. Sitting in the shadow of a rusted loading dock, he overheard two local moisture farmers talking over mugs of spotala. One of them, an aging, gruff alien who ran a massive grain and vapor homestead on the northern plateau, was furiously venting. One of his seasonal hired hands had had too much to drink, gotten into a foolish, destructive brawl at a local tavern, and been promptly locked up in a cell by the local planetary police. Harvest was hitting its peak, and the old farmer was desperate for immediate muscle to bring in the crops before the dry season ruined them. Mace listened, his eyes hidden beneath his heavy hood. A plan formed. A busy farm was the perfect camouflage. The Empire would be looking for a proud Jedi master wielding the Force, not a mute, dirt-stained laborer hauling irrigation pipes. The mind-numbing physical exhaustion would also serve a dual purpose. It would occupy his mind, drowning out the horrific echoes of the purge, and rebuild the shattered strength of his body. The next morning, Mace walked onto the old farmer's homestead. The old alien looked him up and down, taking note of the tall, broad-shouldered frame, the severe facial scars, and the unpolished, clanking metal arm. On an outer rim world, such disfigurements were common signs of a hard life or a rough past. The farmer didn't ask for identification papers, and he didn't care about Mace's history. He just needed someone strong enough to clear boulder fields and haul heavy equipment. Mace simply nodded, accepting the low-paying wage. For Mace, the brutal, routine labor became his new form of meditation. When the voices of the dead threatened to overwhelm him, he focused on the physical weight of the world. As the seasons shifted, Mace traded a portion of his hard-earned farming credits at the outpost for gear suited to the harsh environment. A high-collared duster coat to shield his mechanical joints from the abrasive prairie dust, and a wide-brimmed straw hat to protect his sensitive, scarred skin from Lothal's twin suns. He worked from sunrise to sunset, his face permanently obscured by the shadow of the brim. He spoke only in monosyllables. The physical exhaustion kept him anchored. He was biding his time, waiting for a single crack in the dark side's armor. But Mace's undoing wasn't a physical slip. It was his nature. Mace Windu was a master of Shatterpoint, an incredibly rare force ability that allowed him to perceive the structural weaknesses, fault lines, and critical moments in people and events. Because his mind was naturally attuned to these cosmic pressure points, he could feel when a catastrophic event was about to ripple outward. It happened during the harvest season. A massive, multi-ton automated repulsor harvester suffered a catastrophic engine failure while navigating a steep ridge above the homestead. The gravitational stabilizers snapped, and the immense bladed machine began sliding down the hill toward the farmhouse, where the farmer's young children were playing. If the harvester struck, the impact would detonate its volatile fuel cells, wiping out the entire homestead. In that split second, the sheer scale of the looming catastrophe hit Mace's mind like a blinding flash of light. The shatterpoint in the environment screamed at him. Mace didn't think. His ingrained Jedi training and his stubborn protective instinct overrode his caution. The family was stunned, attributing it to a miraculous mechanical lock. Mace immediately pulled his hand back into his coat, retreating into the shadow of the storage barns. But the Force is not silent. Deep in the core worlds, an Imperial monitoring grid flagged a sudden, anomalous telekinetic spike on Lothal. A localized burst of that magnitude was no accident. The information was routed directly to the Inquis. Part 5. The Gathering Storm. A year into the Empire's reign, the galaxy had grown colder when a sleek, angular Imperial transport broke through Lothal's atmosphere and landed at Capital City. It didn't deploy the familiar clone troopers Mace had commanded on the front lines. Instead, a squad of stormtroopers marched down the ramp, their stark white armor uniform, their faces hidden behind expressionless skull-like filters, and many of their voices bearing the distinct, uncloned accents of human conscripts from the core worlds. The Republic military was entirely gone, replaced by a faceless war machine. But it wasn't the armor that made the hairs on Mace's neck stand up. It was the presence leading them. Mace learned of the arrival during his weekly trip to the town market to trade grain sacks. Standing in the shadow of a rusted loading dock, his straw hat tilted low, Mace watched a tall, gray-skinned alien in sleek obsidian armor walk through the town square. Mace didn't know what an Inquisitor was. The word had never been uttered in the Jedi Council chambers before the Purge. To Mace, this creature was a grotesque mystery. He could sense the faint, butchered echoes of Jedi training, buried beneath a thick, oily layer of dark side malice. It was a hunter, a dark side hound unleashed by Palpatine to clean up the scraps of the Order. Mace didn't panic. He observed. The next 3 days, Mace silently gathered intelligence. He didn't use the Force. He used his eyes, his ears, and his knowledge of military protocol. He noted the hunter's habits, the way he dismissed his stormtrooper escort when interrogating local merchants in private, his overconfident fighting stance, and his complete reliance on fear to keep people compliant. Mace also saw the way the creature walked. He had a slight favor toward his left side, a hidden stiffness from some past injury. Mace wasn't going into this fight blind, nor was he the broken, half-dead man who had crawled out of a Coruscant scrap barge a year ago. The grueling, brutal labor on the farm had acted as a harsh, physical therapy, rebuilding the dense muscle in his torso and arms. More importantly, his silent, relentless routine of daily meditation, turning the physical strain of farming into a focused, rhythmic channeling of the light, had kept his connection to the Force from atrophying. He was stiff, and his scarred nervous system still twinged with phantom lightning pain, but his reflexes and inner sight were sharp. He was not out of shape. He was honed like a buried blade. Most importantly, Mace analyzed the Dark User's Shatterpoint. This hunter wasn't a true master of the dark side. He was an arrogant bully masquerading as a Sith, completely dependent on his bizarre, circular spinning weapon to terrify untrained opponents. Mace knew the hunter would eventually trace the Force anomaly back to the Northern Plateau homestead. To protect the farming family, Mace decided to dictate the terms of the engagement. He would lure the creature into a place where the Empire couldn't see, and where arrogance would become a fatal flaw. Part 6. Weaponless in the high grass. The trap was sprung in the tall, amber grasslands miles outside the farm's perimeter. Mace intentionally left a clear trail of heavy bootprints leading into the dense, wind-swept fields. Sure enough, the dark hunter pursued the trail alone, eager to claim the glory of a Jedi kill for himself. As he pushed through the dry stalks, the wind suddenly died down. Standing in a small clearing ahead of him was the tall, broad-shouldered figure in the high-collared duster coat. The hunter smirked, unclipping his circular weapon. A one-eyed broken relic hiding in the dirt, and weaponless. Mace didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't run. He simply stood his ground, his left hand tucked into his duster, his blocky mechanical right hand exposed to the wind. The hunter lunged, his spinning blade humming a deadly song. What he didn't understand was that Varpad is not a physical sword style. It is an internal circuit. Mace opened his mind, took the hunter's raw arrogance, malice, and dark side fury, and channeled it directly into his own physical movements. The counter. As the hunter swung horizontally, Mace stepped inside the guard, exploiting the stiffness on his left side. He caught the creature's wrist with his flesh hand, and with a sickening crunch, drove his heavy, industrial, mechanical fist straight into the chest plate, shattering the armor and throwing him backward into the dirt. Mace stood over the broken hunter, holding the spinning red hilt. With a cold flick of his wrist, he deactivated the red blades. He didn't use the dark side weapon to kill him. Instead, he used a crushing force choke to silence him permanently. Part 7. The Reconstruction. Mace Windu finally had a weapon, but it was corrupted. He refused to ignite a red blade, the color of the Sith, taking shelter in a network of limestone caves beneath the plateau. Mace used his mechanical hands to meticulously strip down the fallen hunter's lightsaber. He threw away the spinning ring mechanism, hating its cheap, ostentatious design. He kept only the internal power cell, the casing, and the focusing lens. Inside the emitter sat a corrupted, bled-red kyber crystal. Mace sat in meditation for 3 days, using the Force to cleanse the crystal, pouring his unyielding, stubborn devotion to the light and the laws of the Republic back into the stone. He didn't heal it back to a standard blue or green. His internal conflict, his stiffness, and his severe edge resulted in the crystal snapping back to a brilliant, violent amethyst. He assembled a new utilitarian lightsaber. It was blocky, heavy, wrapped in structural tape, and built from the bones of his enemy. Now the Master of the Order was armed, and the hunt could truly begin.